Okay, great. So hi everyone, my name is Mary Ma. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in 2011 and then spent the next 5 years at Citigroup. The first 3 years I was an analyst in the capital markets practice, specifically working on investment grade debt. And then the next 2 years I was an associate in the investment bank, specifically within the healthcare group. So that's a little bit about me. My plan today is really to just go over what capital markets is, how it kind of differs from investment banking, because I do know that there are a lot of resources out there that talk about investment banking, how to prepare for those interviews, but not a whole lot about capital markets. And then I kind of will go over sort of the questions that you'll be asked during a typical interview, kind of things that the interviewers will be looking for, and also give you a sense of what you'll be doing if you do end up being an intern or an analyst on a capital markets desk. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so to start off, what exactly is capital markets? So basically, there are a huge number of groups within capital markets, or CMO as it's called at Citi. What you'll be doing is you'll be working closely with both investment bankers, corporate bankers who are kind of more of the relationship managers, and also sales and traders in raising capital for your institutional clients. So you're really the intermediary party that's linking the sellers of capital, so your clients, corporations like McDonald's or Disney or GE, to the buyers. So, portfolio companies like Prudential or BlackRock. And what you do effectively in capital markets is you are acting as the underwriter, meaning that you are taking on risk on your own balance sheet to originate or structure the securities. And then you're holding the securities temporarily on your balance sheet, and then you're finding buyers for these securities, and you're going to sell them in the primary market. Okay. So like I mentioned, there are a number of groups within capital markets. Each group is going to cover a specific product or a specific security. So within the biggest capital markets groups are equities, or ECM, investment grade debt, or DCM, which is what I was in. Then you have leveraged finance, which is non-investment grade debt and loans, and as well as structured products, which is what you can think of as your ABS, so securities that are backed by credit card receivables, auto loans, things of that nature. Outside of those four big product groups, you also have a lot of other groups, including derivatives, renewable energy. There's a portfolio management group. There are real estate groups that originate, CMBS and RMBS, and a number of other groups. So I would say that in general, you can think of CMO as kind of, sitting between investment banking and sales and trading. Depending on which group you end up in, you might fall a little bit more towards the sales and trading side of the spectrum or the investment banking side of the spectrum. So as an analyst or as an intern, what are kind of your responsibilities? What are you actually going to be doing? First and foremost, what CMO is kind of all about is really monitoring and understanding the market. And so one of the most common tasks that you're going to be asked to do is really to not only just read up on the markets, monitor the markets, but also synthesizing what you're observing into commentary, into slides, into materials for not only external clients, but also higher ups within the firm and people throughout other groups as well. Then you're going to be working on a lot of pitches. These pitches, you might be working on them with your investment banking or corporate banking partners, or you can be working alone. Most of the things you're going to be working on are kind of going to be about market trends. What are sort of the macroeconomic, the regulatory developments that are happening that are relevant for your client? What is the investor sentiment as it pertains to the industry or client? How can the client better structure its own capital structure? How can they optimize, between, for example, debt and equity? How the company's outstanding securities. So, for example, the company just IPO'd. How are their stocks doing in the market? What is the kind of investor commentary surrounding that? And then, most importantly, how are you going to help the company position itself for its next capital markets raise? And then, another thing that you're going to be doing is, kind of to supplement that, you're going to be analyzing a lot of large data sets. You're going to be working with Bloomberg, Excel, FactSet, PowerPoint a lot. You're not going to be conducting valuation in the very traditional sense. When we talk about investment banking, we're talking about sort of, operating models and M&A models. You're not going to be doing that, but you are going to be working with Excel to kind of do securities level valuation and asset level valuation. There's going to be a lot of benchmarking as well. And then lastly, you're going to be working on a lot of deals. So generally, capital markets, there's the deal flow is tremendous compared to investment banking. So when I was on, the investment grade desk, there were some weeks where I had a deal every single day. And so you're going to be the person working with, your director or your MD to really help ensure that all the logistics go to plan. You're going to be executing the financing. You're going to be helping them structure and think about what it is that they want to issue. And then you're going to be the person who's going to, kind of, present on the takeaways and how they can better position for their next issue. Okay. Just before I go on to the next portion, do you guys have any questions? Or anything that I can better clarify? No? Okay. So in terms of the differences, the major differences between CMO and investment banking, you can think of CMO as sort of a subsector within investment banking. So the primary objective of investment bankers is to provide advisory, right? And that includes strategic advisory, which you usually think of as, valuation work, the M&A stuff, and then there's the capital raising advisory. So that is the stuff a CMO does, debt, equity, structured products, et cetera, et cetera. So while it's true that a lot of the investment bankers are intimately involved in a lot of the, financings, especially when it comes to IPOs, the investment bankers are very much the people who are doing a lot of the valuation for the IPOs. The difference is that CMO is the group that sits closer to the investors in the market. So they're the people who actually know, kind of what is actually going on within the markets. Is this the right time to do an IPO? What are the investors thinking as it pertains to your company, to your industry? Are they going to be receptive? Who are the investors that you need to target as you think about going on a roadshow, which is, kind of a marketing process for yourself? So CMO you can think of as sort of the party that is really responsible for executing the transaction, meaning they are going to be the people who are going to price the securities because they know the markets better and they know the investors better. From my personal experience, I think that CMO is honestly much closer to sales and trading than investment banking, just because, you really are going to be focused on the markets during market hours. You're not gonna, your eyes aren't gonna leave your Bloomberg. You're really much more tied to the markets than you would be as an investment banker. And it's really only after market hours where kind of the more investment banking tasks, such as, pitch books and all of that, take place. And then separately, from a cultural perspective, I would say that, CMO has a much flatter structure. So banking is kind of known for its hierarchy. I'm sure you've heard stories of, analysts not really getting to work directly with, senior people. But within capital markets, because, markets are so fast-paced, things change so quickly, there really isn't room for kind of all of that hierarchy. So I would say that generally CMO groups allow for much more junior participation in terms of both just communication with seniors, but also client interaction and deal participation. So I would say that when I was an analyst in capital markets, I had a lot of interactions with clients. even as, kind of a first-year analyst, I was kind of on the phone with clients. I was, taken out to dinners to go to see clients, presentations. And, from my experience as an associate in investment banking, I don't see that happening a lot with their analysts. So that's, for me, a major difference between the two. Did you guys have any questions on that portion? Okay. So, so then to go over kind of what a typical day would look like for you, I can only speak to my experience because I worked in debt. So let's say, you have a deal in the market, and for investment grade debt deals, it's a 1-day execution, meaning you announce the deal very early in the morning, and then you close the deal sometime in the afternoon. That's not true for all capital markets transactions. So for equities, the process is effectively a multi-week process because you have to do a lot of road showing, meaning you have to meet with a lot of accounts beforehand. You kind of have to work with the SEC in terms of your filings, and then once you do actually go out and announce, it's kind of a multi-day process to close. Same thing with leveraged finance transactions. It's a much longer time period. But with investment grade transactions, it's usually 1 day. So typically, I would get into the office at about 7 a.m. in the morning. Investment grade always gets in the earliest because the bond markets technically never close. So I would get in, to the office at 7. I'd probably, check my Bloomberg, check my emails, read up on kind of what the major, headlines have been out of Asia during the overnight session. And then, around 8 a.m., I probably, work on sort of deal-related stuff, make sure that all the logistics are, good to go, double check and, write up the deal announcement. At 9, we'd probably have a call with the client about whether or not they want to proceed with the deal. That's going to depend on market conditions. That's going to depend on kind of the internal things that the client has going on. They'll either move forward with the transaction or kind of delay it for another day. So say that we, announce the transaction kind of at 9:30. Immediately we are getting, kind of on the phone, we're on email with our syndicate, which is kind of you can think of them as the salespeople who are trying to, effectively sell the securities. So we're kind of on the phone with them, trying to summarize, trying to gauge investor feedback, and relaying that to the client. And so really until from, whenever the deal launches until when it's done, it's a pretty hectic time, I would say, because you really have to be 100% focused on the deal. A lot of things are happening, things could be happening in the market that could have an impact on the deal, at which point you really need to kind of relay that information, kind of get on the phone, talk to the client, what does that mean for you? And so, generally the transaction will close and price around, 3 to 4 p.m., at which point you will then start working on sort of the post-transaction overview that kind of just, analyzes, all the things that went well, what things didn't go well, kind of what the market conditions were, and you'll send that to the client that day, usually. And then, after that, whether that be 6 p.m., 7 p.m., that's kind of when you'll start working on, either pitches for your, directors, MDs who have meetings, or you might be preparing for another deal the next day. So that's generally how it was for me as an analyst in investment grade capital markets. So I think, for your CMO interview, I think there are a few things that I would highlight that I think would help you do well during the interview. So one is really a good general understanding of what capital markets is and how it differentiates from investment banking. Speaking as somebody who's sat on kind of hiring committees and done interviews myself, I would say that a lot of people do come in without really understanding what capital markets is, and they throw out kind of a lot of jargon that are more investment banking focused, and that really throws people off. So an important distinction to make is that, capital markets, at least at Citi, they don't, you're not going to be doing sort of the traditional valuation work in the way that you've been taught, in finance classes or that you probably are thinking about, right? You're not cranking out operating models or M&A models, but like I said, you are going to be valuing securities, you're going to be valuing assets, and so that's an important distinction to make. Second of all, it's very important that you have an enthusiasm for the market. And that is very different, from somebody who is interviewing for investment banking and saying that, they feel they know all of the latest deals and, they're all up to date on that. An enthusiasm for the markets is really, do you understand what's going on in the stock market right now? What are kind of the major macroeconomic events that have happened recently? What have been the repercussions from that? You might be asked kind of your views on, the Fed policy, interest rates. A very common question that people usually ask is, how do you price a bond, or, what happens to the price of a bond when interest rates go up or down? So basically, you should really demonstrate that you are following the markets and that you have a view on certain things that are happening in the market. I think another thing that's pretty important is to possess really strong communication skills, and it's really important to present yourself as a very personable individual. The reason why I say that is because, as I mentioned, I personally think that CMO is much closer to sales and trading, especially in culture. So what I mean by that is that the groups are usually, much more outgoing and much more so than investment bankers. And so they're looking for someone who's personable, who they can, they like and they can communicate and connect with. And in terms of the communication piece, like I said, it's a very flat structure in CMO. So even as an intern, even as an analyst, you'll be answering the phones where the client is directly talking to you. Or, one of the things that I was always asked to do was to, draft and put together kind of morning and closing market commentary that was sent to thousands of clients. And so for me, I think, communication abilities, the ability to be professional and demonstrate maturity is very, very important within capital markets. And then, due to the sort of the very hectic nature of capital markets, I think it's very important to be able to think on your feet and be flexible. The CMO environment is definitely much more fast-paced than banking because the markets can change very quickly. And so as a result, you really, you're put into situations where you might be asked to produce materials or make decisions within a very short time frame. And so you really have to be able to be flexible. You really have to know kind of, you have to be able to think on your feet. And then lastly, I think it's important to show that you have a strong desire to learn. I think, coming in as interns or analysts, people know that, you might have sort of a basic understanding of things, but they're not expecting you to know everything. But as long as you show that, you are interested in learning more about the market, you're interested in learning more about the products, and that you can work very hard, I think that'll play in your favor, especially as, the hours, they vary between different groups. Some groups are better than investment banking, some groups are not. So, they're folks who are going to be your interviewers are, going to be looking for people who have the ability to work long hours, but still produce very high quality work at the end of the day. So that's kind of all that I had wanted to tell you guys in terms of, my experience and some pointers for your interviews. Do you guys have any particular questions for me? Anything that I can help further, explain, any questions? Feel free to just write them into the chat or, Okay, well, if there are no questions, I hope that this was helpful. And good luck in your interviews.
Wait, hello?
Hello, yeah.
Oh, hi, Mary. I actually asked a question, but I think I was muted. I have a question about when you were interviewing. So what made you choose ECM versus DCM?
So I was actually in DCM, but the reason why I chose DCM was because it really was more of the people, I would say. I just meshed better with the folks at DCM. It also was a different culture than ECM. So ECM, they work much closer with the investment bankers. It is more of an investment banking culture. And DCM is much more of a sales and trading culture. When I was a junior in college, I had interviewed at BlackRock, or interned at BlackRock. And so I came kind of from a more sales and trading-esque culture, and I like that about DCM.
Okay.
So Catherine asked if I can give any insights to handle the case part of the interview. So usually there isn't a case part of the interview for capital markets. I personally have never heard of anybody giving like a case. I think if anything, they'll probably give you some technical questions. Like I said, they might give you some, numbers and ask you, what is the price of this bond, or, how do you calculate the interest rate? But yeah, I've never heard of anybody giving a case. Does CMO do stock pitches? Yes. So within ECM, so equity capital markets, that is what they do. They work very closely. Oh, I'm sorry, for an interview. I have heard, yes, I've heard that they've asked those questions before, but I would say that it's pretty rare for them to do that. And if anything, it's more, they'll ask you kind of, what kind of stocks are you following, which industries you're following, maybe they'll pick out certain things within your resume. So for example, if you've had experience in, healthcare or consumer, they'll be like, okay, so pitch me a healthcare stock or pitch me a consumer stock, but it's not like a full-blown stock pitch. It's much more informal than that.
Yeah, so I actually have a question that's building off what Jenny just asked, but for the interview, would they also ask for, I guess, pitches maybe for like debt or different types of bonds?
No, generally no, because it's, honestly, I don't think they expect you to kind of, especially coming out of college, get a level to kind of evaluate bonds, just because it's not really something that people do at the college level. I mean, it certainly would be helpful. It would be really helpful if you could speak to that. Like I said, the really the most technical questions as it pertains to fixed income securities would really just be, things like what is convexity, what is duration, but they wouldn't really ask you to, pitch a bond or anything like that.
Okay. And I guess like another question about the interviews. So because CMO is a little bit about S&P and also investment banking, where do you think the interview would generally be focused on? More of the market side or investment banking type of technical questions?
Sorry, you said what would be more focused? Oh, the interview.
Yeah.
Oh, I think the interview will definitely be more S&P focused. So meaning they're not going to ask you like the traditional valuation questions, right? Like the stuff that you guys read in the Vault Guide or what have you, they're not going to ask you about those questions. Like I said, they're really more trying to gauge your interest in the markets, and they're really trying to gauge kind of your personality and your ability to do the work.
Okay. Thank you.
Traffic. I'll be there at 5:40 p.m.
Any more questions? Okay, if there are no more questions, well, thank you guys for attending the webinar. I hope you guys all do really well at your interviews.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome.